Good morning. It's good to be here. I'm Alexis Antracoli.
And I'm Chris Clement.
And this presentation is about a project that we're working on that's in process. And it comes out of part of my job as the records management archivist at Drexel is that I acquire things for the university archives. And more as I'm going out to offices, especially as Drexel spawns a lot of new programs and schools, the bulk of what I'm getting is digital. And almost all of the processes on campus are going to fully paperless processes. And so we're getting, I'm bringing in even small collections that are, 13 gigabytes, and it's just part of a department's records. So we needed to find some scalable way to be able to deal with this, beyond just saying, we're just gonna back it up, right? Like 2 by 2, like having 2 copies in 2 different places isn't enough. We need something that is more scalable and that can ensure the authenticity and accessibility of this material into the future. So just an overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to start by talking about the basic workflow that we worked out as a team. And then Chris will talk about the technology behind that workflow, how that's actually going to work. And then I'll talk a little bit about who we collaborated with and how we built relationships to get support for this across campus. So I hope that you can see this. I'm going to walk through these flowcharts. So this was originally one giant flowchart that Chris can tell you it's really enormous. And it was a lot more intricate because I put a lot more detail in it. But what I've done is I've broken it up into acquisitions, processing, and access for you. And I'm starting with the acquisition of physical media. So we know that we're still going to get a lot of stuff on CDs, potentially on floppy disks, on thumb drives. It's going to come to us. And so, but we want to help transition people to submitting their electronic records online so that we don't have to deal with the physical media, which is time consuming and not very scalable. So what we've done is thought about this as a service model. So a depositor who has historical records here will receive training, essentially, in how to send records to the archives, whether those are paper records or electronic records on physical media or stored on a shared drive or in a university system. They'll receive training. And then once they receive training, and they fill out an online transfer form. So all the transfer forms will be online, and then an archivist will look it over and figure out, is this a physical or an online transfer, or potentially both. If it's physical, the archivist will still do what's done now, which is make an appointment, go meet with the records creator, do some appraisal, pick up the materials, and bring them back to the archives where they will be assigned their accession number, information will be entered into Archivist Toolkit, they'll be put in temporary storage until they're assigned to a processor, and then we'll acknowledge the receipt. We send the accession number, we call it a transfer number with our depositors to try and get away from jargon, so that if they know it's been received and is stored somewhere, and if they have questions, they can contact us. So that's the basic workflow for physical media, of paper and physical electronic media. If it's an online transfer, what will happen is that once that's determined, the depositor will receive an SFTP account, essentially, that can be used for a limited time. And they'll log into that SFTP account and they'll upload their records. The other part of the process, assigning an accession number, entering information, is the same. But the part that's different is that it will go into a quarantine server, essentially, where there will be a virus scan and a checksum run on it immediately. It will then sit on that quarantine server for 30 days, and it will be scanned again, and the archivist will verify the transfer. essentially that what was on the transfer form is what was sent over. And then if that all passes muster, essentially, the archivist will do the same thing and acknowledge that transfer and send the transfer number to the depositor. So processing. If it's physical media, this is where the physical media becomes time consuming and difficult to work with. So if it's physical media, we'll write block it, we'll virus scan it, we'll wait 30 days, we'll virus scan it again. We photograph our media, we'll transfer files to an interim repository, basically server space, via a disk imaging process. Then we'll save all the photograph, the log files, the virus scans, and everything to our metadata folder. And right now, for space considerations, and because of the type of media that we're working with, we're probably going to delete the disk images at this point and not save those. We'll probably never provide access through disk images. But, I mean, that could change. And then we would perform a PII scan. If it's an online transfer, we essentially don't have to do this. A lot of this is automated. That virus scan log, the checksum calculation, there's no physical media. So it just gets transferred right to the interim repository, and then there's this, we search for personally identifiable information. We do arrangement and description with some tools, some basic tools that are pretty low cost, tree size. We use a Mac so that we can view files. You can also use QuickView Plus. And then we're going to be using Archivematica for our digital preservation tasks, and then we'll also redact or delete anything with personally identifiable information at this point. So we'll have to do appraisal there. And then access. So after that's done, it goes into Archivematica. At the same time, while essentially it's being processed there, the processor will create and update the biography, history, the scope and content note, catalog information, and then the files get uploaded to the repository. The finding aid gets published, linked to the repository. The depositor is notified that the records are available. And, we tried to come up with something different than depositor delight, but that's what we ended up with. So depositor delight, essentially. And part of this is that we want to keep the depositor informed about where in the process things are, and that's why we have those couple of pieces of notification so they know it's been received. Maybe we'll add in, now it's being processed. I'm not 100% sure about that, but the idea is they'll always be notified when something significant happens to the records they submitted so they can go back and access them, as well as future researchers. And now Chris will talk about the technology behind how all this is going to happen.
Hello, everyone. So first I will go over what our current environment is and how that ties into the three phases of the workflow: acquisition, processing, and access. And then I'll briefly go over some of the next steps we'll take after our initial setup. So right now we have two IBM servers that each one has about 32 processors and a ton of RAM each. And installed on these servers, we have a Citrix Zen server, which we're using as our virtualization environment. Right now this houses our virtual machines for pretty much every service the library offers except for the catalog, which is maintained by our IT organization. For our storage, we have Hitachi Unified Storage, or HUS for short. We have about 22 terabytes of space available on this HUS. For backups, we have a tape management system from Spectra. We're running Bacula to coordinate all of that. And we're in the process of getting a second HUS, which will allow us to make our data redundant, and it will be at a second location, so in the event of a terrible disaster, we won't lose anything. So right now, acquisition, it's still mostly a manual process for this first pass. So the depositor submits a transfer form. That's how we know that we have to create a virtual disk to hold their deposit, which they will upload through the secure upload account that we will create for them. Once we receive it, we perform a virus scan. Right now we're looking into using Clement. We wait 30 days, perform the scan again, and all of this is logged and archived. For processing, personally identifiable information was mentioned earlier. We're looking to use BitCurator, which is a PII scanning tool suite, to collect that information. Archivist Toolkit is part of the processing workflow step that's housed on an already existing virtual machine that we have. And Archivematica will be used to generate dissemination and archival packages, which is housed on yet another virtual machine. Alright, so access, as you saw in Alexis's slides, Archivist Toolkit is used to update the bibliographic information. And once we get to this point, the data that has been processed by Archivematica is now ingested into our Fedora Island Dora setup, which is pretty much just a LAMP stack running MySQL, Tomcat, and Solr for indexing. Next steps, as you saw earlier, there are quite a few manual pieces to this. We would like to automate the creation of the virtual disk to hold the deposit, as well as the depositor's account creation and eventual expiration. We would not like to leave these accounts active indefinitely. We would also like to schedule the virus scans so we don't have to manually perform that step as well. We're also looking into current integration efforts between both BitCurator and Archivematica, and also Archivematica and Island Dora. And I believe we're also in the process of getting an additional 10 terabytes of storage, because we're going to need more every year while we have this in place. So now, I believe, back to Alexis.
Yes. So finding partners. So this all actually got started because I made a phone call to the general counsel's office. I knew we needed to do something like this. I work closely with the general counsel and other parts of my work, and I called them and I said, what are the privacy and security requirements for university records? Because we're especially concerned about the current president's records, which are being generated heavily in the electronic world, and we're going to need, if we want it, we know we're going to need to be able to satisfy the general counsel's requirements. And they said, call the privacy office. They're now the privacy office for the medical school is now the privacy office for all of Drexel. Call them. So I called the privacy office and I said, hey, can we just sit down and talk about privacy and security requirements for university records? And they said, sure, yeah, we can do that. I'm going to send over our director of privacy, and he'll just sit, for a meeting. So he comes over, and he met with me and with Chris and other staff members and systems at the time. Systems didn't have, very understaffed at the time. But anyway, they were very good. They were happy to do it. The university archivist, some other folks, and they said, well, we're doing this new process where everyone at the university who implements a new system is going to basically have to go through this audit process and document everything that their new system will do. And I was really excited about it because I wanted to have that kind of documentation and really build out a workflow for this process, because I know that the more that having that means that you have something that the folks and systems can actually build for you. So then we brought in another member of the library staff, the liaison librarian for business, who helped us with the project. So the contributors, essentially, we had many meetings. They lasted anywhere from I would say 2 to 4 hours. Some of them were just library folks. Others were with the director of privacy. So we had Emily Missner, who's the liaison librarian for business and has expertise in service marketing, who helped us think about how we could think not just about these technical back-end processes that we need to run, but how we can also use this is an opportunity to improve the service that we provide to the depositors and to really market what we're doing as a service in order to get more people to think about transferring things to the archives. And in my sort of test mentions of this, when I mention the online upload, people get really excited. They're like, that would be great. And then Ian Richmond, who's also in systems, helped us with the workflow. And Robert Asante, who's the university's director of privacy, sat in on a lot of the meetings and helped us, asked a lot of questions about the processes we were developing, especially the privacy and security pieces and the technologies that we were using. And so they provided us with expertise that we just, we wouldn't have had in-house in the archives. And so by leveraging people from different parts of the university and different departments in the library, we were able, I think, to create something that we probably wouldn't have been able to do on our own, just as archivists. And so how do we build more buy-in for this beyond just the folks that we were working with? I think it helped that I started by asking the general counsel. We went through this process. Once we had developed our basic working outline of what we wanted to do, we invited folks from the general counsel's office to sit in on a presentation. We walked through it. They were really excited about it. They provided feedback. We were able to address their concerns. So we have the general counsel support now. We were able to get the support of library leadership by, essentially discussing how it would help the university, how it was an opportunity for the library across campus. So both the head of the unit that I'm in and the head of the unit that Chris is in, I forget the names of the units, that's really bad. There are a lot of changes, so names have been changing frequently these days. So we were able to get their buy-in, which helped us to get more storage in that second husk that Chris talked about. We met with the Legacy Center at the Drexel College of Medicine, which is their archives. We presented this to them. They're going to be dealing with a lot of the same things that we are, and so they were really excited to have something that they could tap into, and we invited them to give their advice and told them, whenever you want to start sending someone to regularly work on this stuff as we build it and to give input, let us know. And so it was really inviting people to meetings, asking them for feedback, and then integrating their suggestions into our plans when it made sense, which helped us build support. And so there are still things to work out. This is still in process, but I feel pretty confident that we have a wide range of backing and support and did it in a well thought out way, and that it will, in the future, that we'll see this process actually become reality. So, questions, I guess.
Are you going to transition to archive space? Replace archive school kit, and how will that figure into your storage model?
That's a good question. Probably yes. It's not a priority for us right now to transition to archive space. I know that they're talking about not providing support for potentially for migration after a year, but we've just decided that, we've looked at what we have to do on our staffing and priorities, and AT works for us now, so that will be down the road, something we'll have to look at. I'm sorry.
Talk a little bit about how you're doing for outreach. Are you waiting for people to say they're going to retire before you put out their papers? Are you just tweaking projects? Are they publish something? How are you guys doing about?
So most of the stuff I collect is not faculty records. It's more administrative stuff that we're going after right now, as opposed to faculty outreach. I do a number of things. I do a lot of workshops and one-on-one outreach and interviews and surveys with staff members that actually work with the records we want. So I really try and build relationships and offer services that help them in their jobs, and then I sort of, tack on that, hey, do you have any records that are historical that we can transfer I also, there's been a lot of moving on campus, and so I do outreach to departments that are about to move and say, hey, we can take your stuff. Now's a good time. You don't want to move it. What are other things that also as there are all these new schools and departments and mergers, that's also a good opportunity. So it's less, I guess I take a few different tacks. I think that in terms of faculty records, that's not a priority for us right now, but especially with the digital stuff, I try and get in as early as I can. And the new departments and the mergers, I'm taking stuff right away that's like 6 months old, right? I'm like, let's start now, and that seems to be working.
I have actually sort of a simple question. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the transfer protocol that's going to be used for the upload, and what's the largest amount of transfer you would expect in one go?
I think the first part is yours.
I can answer the first part. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What's the transfer protocol that you guys are going to be using for the online transfer? Is HTTP?
Well, we're looking into using secure FTP. But that's not terribly user-friendly, so I'm also investigating using chunked uploads using HTML5 forms and the ability to do resumable uploads. So, but I'm not entirely sure yet. I just started looking into that last week. No, that's fine. That's fine. It was a good question.
And how much data would you expect in one upload from a user? Like 10 gigs or less than a gig? Or?
So I think we're gonna have to figure that out. We had a 3 terabyte transfer on hard drives not too long ago of video, and we know that's one of the things. I'm like, we know we're gonna be getting that stuff, and it's not. This is an office that's gonna be giving us a terabyte a year, and so there's a question. That's something where I would defer to systems to say how much can we take at a time. Do we have to ask them to chunk that up? We might have to do that. And so we're figuring that out, but I know that we're going to get people transferring a terabyte or more at a time, especially if it's AV stuff. With the office records, maybe like 10 to 20 gigs at a time.
And I'm sorry, one last one. I'm assuming there's not going to be like a dedicated type for this type of transfer, like they would just going over the network, whatever.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just over the network.
So because they're university records, I've sort of thought about this, like, can we charge people? And I think that, if we tried to charge people at the university, but there was, we would need to then have a mandate that comes from the top saying you have to do this. So right now, no. Part of it is like building this buy-in with these other stakeholders at the university. And ultimately, when we have to go to the current president and say, if you want us to save your stuff, like, here's what has to be done and cost this much money, that, I think it's just a cost of operating an archives in our world, just like we have to pay for physical storage as an archives, and we've never charged for that. Maybe we need to rethink that. I don't have a great answer for it. Yeah. So, in other words, is it... So no one else has ever thought of this in terms of anywhere?
Well, within the university itself, is someone else collecting and you're taking over the materials, or you're starting something new, a new centralized area?
So it's really, this is based on a lot of my own knowledge and research into what other universities are doing in this area. it is certainly, there has been no centralized repository for electronic university records before. Like, this is brand new. And the last part of your question?
We'll have access to it.
Oh, who will have? So that's a great question. And some of this stuff will be publicly available. Some of it will be restricted for a certain number of years, but still have to be available to authorized users within the office that created it. So, for example, the Board of Trustees books would eventually come into this system, and they would not be publicly accessible, but we would want to make the archival copy accessible to authorized users on campus. So that will have to be figured out. How do we manage access to authorized users on campus to materials that are not yet publicly accessible? Yep.
Well, this is an area I'm not very familiar with, though. What sort of criteria do you use to determine what records you will archive, and how do you choose records?
That's a really big question. Any other archivists want to talk about that? So we have certain types of records that we're looking for all the time, and basically what we're trying to do is document the main functions of the university. And so we look functionally at, how the university is structured and what kind of documentation will provide us with, a decent selection of materials that demonstrate, what was going on at Drexel in any time period. Certain things like course catalogs and, the website, the university's websites, publications we always take. A lot of administrative records, meeting minutes, committee meeting records, correspondence of high-level administrators. That's typically the kind of stuff that we're taking. Drexel has not had a tradition of archiving a lot of faculty papers, and there's another project at the university to try and build a repository for research data, and I think that that's something that once we have a system in place for the main administrative records of the university, we might start thinking more about that.
Does Drexel have a record retention schedule?
We do have a records retention schedule and records management policy. So, and they're online. You can go look at them. It's a 50-page retention schedule.